Rain had a way of erasing the confidence from a woman's step, especially when London watched. It slicked the cobblestones until the street gleamed like a blade, reflecting gaslight and judgment in equal measure. On such a night, a single mistake could echo louder than a confession. And for Miss Clara Whitcomb, that mistake waited behind a lacquered carriage door. She had been dismissed moments earlier from a house not her own. Her employment concluded with apologies that rang hollow and eyes that would not meet hers. The position had been modest, the wages thinner still, yet it had offered respectability, which in 1847 was worth more than comfort. With her gloves damp and her pride thinner than the silk at her wrists, Clara scanned the street for the hired carriage promised to her, the rain blurring crests and lamps alike. The door opened before she could reconsider. Warmth breathed outward. She stepped inside, murmuring thanks to no one in particular, and only when the door closed did she sense the presence opposite her. The carriage moved at once, decisive, as though it had always known its destination. Clara's breath caught. Leather, wool, the faint scent of bay rum and rain. A man's space. Her fingers tightened around her reticule, and she turned, heart hammering, to see him. He did not startle. He regarded her as one might regard an unexpected sentence in a familiar book, pausing to weigh its meaning. His face was carved by restraint, dark hair brushed back with military precision, eyes steady and unyielding. A duke's face, she would later realize, though she did not yet know his name. She only knew that the air itself seemed to hold its breath. "I beg your pardon," she said, the words tumbling over one another. "I fear there has been an error." "So it would appear," he replied. His voice was low, unhurried, carrying neither anger nor amusement. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against the roof like impatient fingers. For a moment neither moved. Then the carriage slowed. It stopped before a townhouse whose facade glowed with wealth even through the downpour. A footman approached. The door was opened, and with it, the world. Light spilled onto the pavement. Clara descended, cheeks aflame, acutely aware of the eyes gathering along the street, of silhouettes pausing beneath umbrellas, of curiosity sharpening into speculation. She had emerged from a gentleman's private carriage, alone, at night. The whispers began before the door had fully closed. They clung to her skirts as surely as the rain. She could feel her life narrowing, reputation collapsing inward like wet paper. She turned back, ready to plead her innocence to a stranger whose name she did not know, whose power she could only sense. He stepped down after her, coat dark with rain, presence commanding the street into silence. "The fault is mine," he said, clearly, so that those nearest might hear. "The lady is under my protection." His gaze flicked, sharp as a drawn line, toward the watching figures. "You may see her safely conveyed." The footman bowed. The watchers looked away, some chastened, others merely storing the moment for later use. Clara stood rigid, astonishment battling mortification. Protection. The word settled over her like a cloak she had not earned. She inclined her head, unable to trust her voice, and was guided toward another carriage, this one unmistakably hired, its lamps modest, its purpose plain. As she was helped inside, she met his eyes once more. Something unreadable passed between them, not kindness exactly, but recognition. The carriage door closed, sealing her into darkness and motion. Only then did she allow her breath to shake. The journey to her lodgings was mercifully short. She paid the driver with coins that trembled in her palm and climbed the narrow stairs to her room, where a single candle waited. There, she removed her damp bonnet and stared at her reflection, searching for the ruin others would now see. She had done nothing, and yet everything had changed. She sat upon the edge of her bed, listening to the building settle, to distant wheels and muffled laughter beyond her window. Every sound seemed an accusation. She imagined doors closing tomorrow, conversations halting when she entered a room, the careful glances that pretended to be concerned. Respectability, once lost, was never truly recovered. It merely learned to wear a quieter name. Clara folded her gloves with unnecessary precision, as though order in small things might preserve order in her life. She told herself she would endure. Women always did. Yet endurance, she knew, was not the same as safety. By morning, London would have embroidered the scene beyond recognition. A woman without family, without fortune, without a husband, stepping from a duke's carriage as though she belonged there. Clara pressed her forehead to the cold glass of the window, listening to the rain subside into a whisper. She thought of her mother's cautions, of the narrow paths allowed to women, of how easily one slipped from them. Across the city, in rooms built for certainty, the man she had wronged by accident stood alone, considering the same moment. The Duke of Ashcombe, though she did not yet know the title, removed his gloves with deliberate care. He had seen fear before, had seen dignity fighting for breath beneath it. He had not intended to intervene. Yet he had. In the silence that followed, he understood that London would not be content with misunderstanding. It would demand a narrative, and it would choose one if he did not. As the rain ceased and the night held its breath, two lives, briefly intersecting by chance, began to bend toward consequences neither could yet name. And somewhere beyond caution and custom, an idea, unwelcome yet insistent, took root, that duty might soon require a choice neither reputation nor rank could easily forgive. It was the faint tremor of a future already shifting beneath the polished floors of society and power. Morning did not soften London's memory. It sharpened it. By the time Clara Whitcomb stepped into the street 2 days later, the rain-washed cobblestones seemed to reflect not light but rumor, each passerby carrying a version of her already finished. Invitations failed to arrive. A milliner who once smiled now measured her with professional distance. Even the landlady's greeting thinned, polite yet provisional, as though Clara were a guest whose stay might soon require explanation. She walked carefully, chin lifted, refusing the instinct to hurry. Dignity, she had learned, was not protection, but it could be armor. At the circulating library, a pause followed her request, brief yet unmistakable, before the volume was handed over. The clerk's eyes lingered, curious rather than cruel. Clara thanked her and left, pulse quickened by nothing more than a look. That afternoon, a knock sounded at her door. It was not the hesitant rap of a tradesman, nor the familiar one of a neighbor. It was measured, confident. When she opened it, a footman stood in the narrow corridor, immaculate despite the climb, silver buttons catching the light. He presented a card and a parcel wrapped in brown paper, tied with green ribbon. The card bore a single name, engraved with restraint, Ashcombe. No title, no explanation. Her fingers hovered before she took it. Inside the parcel lay a bouquet, winter roses and white hellebore, arranged with deliberate simplicity. No note accompanied them. Clara felt the room tilt, as though generosity itself were a provocation. She did not display the flowers. She set them by the window, where only she might see them, and returned the card to its envelope. The gesture unsettled her more than the whispers. It suggested intention, and intention invited interpretation. By evening, interpretation arrived. At the grocer's, 2 women fell silent as she entered. One recovered first, remarking too brightly on the weather. The other watched Clara's reflection in the glass jars, her smile sharp with interest. "I hear you have powerful friends," she said, as if offering congratulations. Clara paid and left without answering, the bouquet's phantom scent clinging to her thoughts. The following morning brought another disturbance. This time, the visitor introduced herself. Lady Eleanor Ashcombe stood in Clara's doorway as though it were entirely proper that she should, tall and composed, her attire elegant without ostentation. Her eyes, a lighter shade than her brother's, missed nothing. "I hope you will forgive the intrusion," Lady Eleanor said. "I wish to assure myself that you were not inconvenienced by recent events." The words were gentle, yet carried weight. Clara invited her in, acutely aware of the narrowness of the room, of how little space there was for pretense. They spoke first of inconsequence, the weather, the difficulty of navigating the city, the reliability of footmen. Then Lady Eleanor allowed a pause to stretch, observing Clara with an expression both kind and calculating. "London can be uncharitable," she said at last, "particularly when imagination outruns fact." "I have done nothing," Clara replied, quietly, "and yet I am treated as though I have." "Just so," Lady Eleanor said. which places you in a most unenviable position. She rose, smoothing her gloves. My brother dislikes unfinished stories. He prefers matters resolved. That afternoon, a note arrived inviting Clara to attend a small music hall at the Ashcombe residence. The phrasing was impeccable, the implication unmistakable. To attend would inflame gossip. To refuse would confirm it. Clara sat with the letter until the candle burned low, weighing pride against survival. She attended. The house was all light and symmetry, chandeliers scattering brilliance over polished floors. Conversations dipped as she entered, then resumed with new energy. The Duke greeted her with formal courtesy, offering his arm as though it were the most natural thing in the world. For a moment, she felt the dangerous comfort of belonging. Music filled the room, delicate and precise. Clara listened, aware of glances tracking her movements, of curiosity sharpening into speculation. Then she noticed a shift. A woman whispered. A gentleman raised his brows. The narrative was changing, recasting her not as victim but as design. When the evening ended, the Duke escorted her to the door himself. "You have been very brave," he said, so softly only she could hear. The words startled her more than praise. As the carriage carried her away, Clara understood that the tokens meant to shield her had instead bound her to a story not of her choosing, and that somewhere, behind the courtesy and calm, a plan was forming whose cost had yet to be named. She leaned back as the wheels turned, the city blurring into streaks of amber and shadow, and felt the face-true stir of fear since that night of rain. Courage had carried her through the doors, but courage could not dictate the ending. The Duke's attention was a force she did not know how to refuse, nor how to survive unmarked. Some way ahead waited either rescue or erasure, and she could no longer tell them apart. As the carriage crossed the bridge, wind lifting the hem of her cloak, Clara pressed her gloved hands together and wondered whether being seen, at last, would prove more dangerous than being forgotten. Above her, unseen, windows burned with certainty, while beneath them her future rearranged itself without consent. She sensed, dimly, that Lady Eleanor's visit had not been merely charitable, nor the invitation accidental. Threads were being drawn tight, guiding her toward a place already imagined by others. The knowledge settled heavily, yet not without a strange warmth, for in that imagined place she was not alone. When the carriage slowed at her door, Clara did not immediately rise. She allowed herself one final breath of suspension, knowing that once she stepped out, the story would no longer wait for her agreement. It would soon demand an answer, and the asking, she sensed, would come not from her, but from power itself, watching and unwilling to be denied. Evening drew its curtain early, and the Ashcombe library glowed like a held breath behind tall windows streaked with rain. Clara stood just inside the threshold, her gloves folded in her hands, acutely aware of the silence waiting for her to speak first. Shelves rose around them, dark wood and order, the scent of leather and firelight binding the room into intimacy. The Duke closed the door with unhurried care, sealing them away from witnesses, from speculation, from the city that had grown hungry for her name. He did not immediately turn. Instead, he went to the hearth, adjusted a log, and watched the flames settle, as though composure were a thing constructed by degrees. Clara studied the line of his shoulders, the economy of his movements, and felt again the danger of gratitude. When he faced her, his expression was controlled yet not distant, a man choosing precision over ease. "I regret that my sister has placed you in an uncomfortable position," he said. "Her intentions are not unkind." "I do not doubt that," Clara replied. "Yet kindness can still wound." The admission surprised her with its steadiness. "I did not seek your protection, nor the attention that followed." "I'm aware," he said. A pause followed, weighted but not awkward. "And yet I offered it." She lifted her chin. "Why?" The question seemed to strip the room of warmth. He considered her, eyes sharpening not with scrutiny but with memory. "Because I recognize the moment," he said at last. A woman stepping into a story she did not write, already judged before she could speak. Clara's breath faltered. No one had named it so plainly. "You cannot undo it," she said. "What is done belongs to London now." London does not own everything, he replied quietly. It believes it does. She moved closer to the fire, seeking warmth she did not quite feel. Your belief has cost me, she said, not accusing, merely stating fact. Doors have closed. Faces have changed. I am grateful, but I am also diminished. The words seemed to strike him. His jaw tightened. I have spent my life watching women diminish for the sake of order, he said. Sisters, cousins, widows. I told myself it was inevitable. And now? She asked. And now I find inevitability a poor excuse, he said. He took a step nearer, then stopped, as though checking himself against an unseen boundary. I would not have you think I am unaware of the danger my attention represents. Then you must allow me to withdraw, Clara said. Let the story fade. It will not, he said, with certainty. Absence invites invention. At least presence allows some measure of truth. She laughed softly, without mirth. Truth is rarely consulted. No, he agreed, but it may yet be spoken. He hesitated, then continued, I have not offered you anything without cost. That was wrong. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the fire's low murmur. Clara felt the room shift, the careful balance tipping. What would you have me do? She asked. He met her gaze fully now, and something in his restraint loosened. I would have you understand that my actions were not merely strategic, he said, nor entirely selfless. Her pulse quickened. Then name them. He drew a breath, slow and measured. When I saw you that night, I saw fear mastered by dignity. It is a rare thing. It unsettled me. The confession hung between them, fragile as glass. Clara's fingers curled into her gloves. That is not enough, she said, though her voice wavered. Interest is not salvation. No, he said, it is not. His eyes softened. But it is a beginning. She turned away, overwhelmed by the heat, by the nearness, by the possibility implied yet unspoken. Beginnings can be cruel, she said, especially when endings are preordained. Are they? He asked. She faced him again, searching his expression for certainty and finding none. You are a duke, she said. I'm a woman whose reputation now requires explanation. Then let us explain it properly, he said, and stopped himself. The words lingered, unfinished, heavier for their restraint. Clara understood then what he was offering and what he was not yet ready to say. The room seemed to contract around that understanding, intimate and perilous. She inclined her head, not in submission but acknowledgement. I will consider what has passed between us, she said, but I cannot promise alignment with your solutions. I would expect nothing less, he replied. As she reached the door, his voice followed her, quiet as still. If I were a different man, he said, this conversation would not end as it must. Her hand stilled on the latch. For one heartbeat, she allowed herself to imagine that other ending. Then she opened the door and stepped back into the corridor, carrying with her the weight of a truth nearly spoken, and the certainty that restraint, once cracked, could never be restored to its original shape. Outside, the house breathed with life, footsteps distant, candles trimmed, nothing altered by what had passed in the library. Clara paused there, listening, aware that composure had become her most fragile possession. She descended the stairs with care, each step a decision not to look back. Yet the conversation followed her, echoing in the measured cadence of his voice, in the space where a declaration might have lived. By the time she reached the night air, resolve had begun to wrestle with longing. She did not know which would prevail. She only knew that something irrevocable had occurred, not in words spoken, but in those withheld. As the door closed behind her and the city reclaimed her, Clara sensed that restraint had done its work too well. It had transformed possibility into obligation, and interest into expectation. Somewhere above, a duke remained by the fire, equally altered. Between them lay a silence newly alive, waiting to be broken, and certain that when it was, neither would emerge unchanged. The threat arrived not with violence but with ink, pressed into paper with the confidence of someone accustomed to being believed. Clara received the letter at breakfast, its seal already broken by a landlady too curious to resist. The contents were brief, elegant, and merciless, suggesting that certain indiscretions observed might soon require public clarification unless arrangements were made. No name signed it. None was needed. London rarely hid its hand when it wished to wound. She folded the letter with care and placed it beside her teacup, appetite forgotten. The room felt suddenly smaller, the walls complicit. To be silent was to consent. To speak was to invite ruin. By noon, she had resolved nothing, except that endurance had reached its limit. That evening, the Ashcombe carriage arrived unannounced. The Duke himself stepped down, rain beating on his hat, expression set with a gravity she had not yet seen. He did not wait for invitation. "You have been threatened," he said, once they were inside her narrow sitting room. It was not a question. "Yes," she replied, "as you warned." She handed him the letter. He read it once, then again, jaw tightening. When he looked up, decision had replaced restraint. "This ends now," he said. "They will not toy with you." "They already have," Clara said. "Your attention has made me visible. Visibility invites punishment." He met her gaze steadily. "Then I will make it invitation-proof." He drew a breath. "I intend to announce my intention." The word struck like a bell. "Intention," she repeated. "Not affection." "Affection is private," he said. "Intention is what society understands." She turned away, anger rising at the careful phrasing. "I will not be your solution," she said, "nor your shield." He moved closer, voice lowering. "Nor would I have you be." He hesitated, then spoke with a frankness that cut through ceremony. "I care for you, Clara Whitcomb. Not as a cause, not as a convenience." The use of her name undid her composure. She faced him, eyes bright. "Caring is not choosing," she said. "It is when the cost is borne willingly," he replied. "I will accept whatever consequence follows." News travels faster when escorted by power. By the next afternoon, drawing rooms hummed, and opinions sharpened like knives honed for sport. Some praised his decisiveness, others condemned his recklessness. Clara felt the city pivot around her, no longer questioning whether she had erred, but whether she had triumphed. The shift sickened her. She had not sought victory. She had sought peace. The announcement came before assembled company, delivered not in triumph, but in calm resolve. The Duke spoke with measured clarity, his words precise, his bearing unassailable. He did not name love. He named respect, intention, and honor. He accepted scrutiny without flinching. The room listened. London recalibrated. Afterward, he found her in a quiet antechamber, the noise distant, her hands trembling despite her composure. "I have done what I can publicly," he said. "What remains is yours." She searched his face, seeking the man behind the title. "You have offered me certainty," she said, "but I fear the cost of being chosen for reasons that may change." "They will not," he said simply. "Certainty can still cage," she said. "I have lived too close to confinement to mistake it for safety." He reached for her hand, then stopped, letting the space speak. "Then take time," he said. "I will not hurry you into gratitude, nor bind you with obligation." That night, she did not sleep. She thought of independence, of safety purchased with silence, of a future arranged by benevolence rather than desire. She thought of his restraint, and of how costly it must be. At dawn, she wrote a single line, sealed it, and left it with the porter, a message neither accepting nor refusing. When they met again, it was in the garden, winter-bare and honest, frost still clinging to the earth. "I cannot accept yet," she said, before he could speak. "Not without knowing that I am desired, not merely defended." His expression did not harden. It softened. "Then know this," he said. "I would rather endure disgrace with you than triumph without you." The words settled between them, irrevocable. Clara felt the ground shift beneath her feet, not toward certainty, but toward truth. She looked at him, truly, and saw not rescue but risk shared. Still, fear held her tongue. "I must choose myself first," she said. "And I will wait," he replied. She returned alone through the streets, every lamplit window a witness, every carriage a reminder of how easily fate shifted. She passed familiar corners where once she had been invisible, now feeling the weight of imagined eyes. The city seemed to test her resolve, offering both admiration and suspicion in equal measure. She realized then that acceptance would not restore what had been lost, only transform it. Refusal, however, might cost her the one person who had spoken to her without disguise. Each step became a question, each breath an argument. She measured courage against solitude, love against autonomy, wondering whether they must always be enemies. Somewhere behind her, she knew, the Duke was facing a quieter trial, defending his choice against expectation and bloodline alike. That knowledge warmed her even as it frightened her, for it made retreat feel like betrayal. The thought lingered, unresolved, pressing upon her heart with the insistence of something that refused to be dismissed or delayed any longer now alone. As she walked away, the garden seemed to hold its breath. He remained where he was, dignity intact, heart exposed. Clara did not look back, but she carried his declaration with her, heavy and bright as a promise. London buzzed with conclusions, yet the true resolution had been deferred. Between them stood not scandal, but choice, unmade and luminous. When night fell, both understood that the next step would determine not how they were seen, but who they would become. The city waited, as it always did, with the patience of something that believed itself eternal. London had spoken, speculated, rearranged its moral furniture around Clara Whitcomb's name, and now it watched for the final act with composed anticipation. She felt that attention even as she stood alone in her small room, fastening a simple gown whose elegance lay not in ornament but in intention. There would be no borrowed finery tonight, no attempt to persuade. Whatever she chose would be done as herself, fully seen. The invitation lay open on the table, its crest unmistakable. A final gathering at Ashcombe House before the Duke's departure for the country, framed as a farewell but understood by all as a reckoning. Clara had delayed until delay itself became a decision. When at last she reached for her gloves, her hands were steady. Fear had not vanished, but it had been answered. The carriage ride passed in reflective silence. Gas lamps blurred into constellations as she crossed the river, the water below dark and purposeful. She thought of the girl she had been before the wrong carriage, before protection masquerading as peril, before choice announced itself as both gift and burden. That girl had endured quietly. This woman intended to speak. Ashcombe House glowed with contained brilliance. Inside, voices rose and fell, silk whispered, expectations gathered like breath before plunge. Clara entered without announcement. Heads turned. A murmur followed. She did not slow. At the far end of the room, the Duke stood apart from the crowd, posture formal, expression unreadable. When he saw her, something in his stillness altered, not hope exactly, but readiness. They did not speak at once. Music carried the moment, a measured piece that filled the space between glance and word. Clara crossed the floor as though it were a threshold long prepared for her feet alone. When she reached him, he inclined his head, offering courtesy rather than claim. "You came," he said. "I said I would choose," she replied. "I did not say when." A flicker of something like relief passed through his eyes, quickly mastered. "Then let us step aside." They withdrew to a smaller room, where the noise softened into distance and the fire burned low. Hey, there were no witnesses to instruct the moment. Clara turned to face him fully, her breath slow, deliberate. "I have been the subject of rescue," she said, "of speculation, of generosity that carried its own demands. I will not accept a life arranged out of pity or principle alone." "You have never inspired pity in me," he said at once. "Only respect, and something more dangerous." She nodded. "I believe you, but belief is not enough." She met his gaze, unflinching. "If I accept you, it will not be as a solution to scandal, nor as a grateful beneficiary of your power. It will be because you see me as your equal in risk." He drew a breath that seemed to come from deeper than his lungs. "Then hear this plainly," he said. "I choose you knowing precisely what I risk. My standing, my ease, the approval of those who mistake conformity for virtue. I choose you because life without you would be intact, but diminished." The words landed without flourish, stripped of performance. Clara felt the last of her defenses give way, not in surrender but in recognition. "Then hear this," she said. "I choose you not because you can shield me, but because you never pretended that shielding was the same as loving." For a moment, neither moved. The space between them felt charged, irrevocable. Then he reached for her hand, this time without restraint, and she placed hers in his with equal certainty. It was not a triumph. It was an accord. When they returned to the assembly together, the shift was immediate and unmistakable. London saw what it understood best: unity, decision, power aligned with resolve. Whispers stilled. Appraisal gave way to acceptance, some grudging, some eager. The Duke spoke briefly, formally, announcing what no one doubted any longer. Clara stood beside him, neither hidden nor displayed, her presence a statement beyond explanation. Later, as the gathering thinned and carriages departed, they stood once more at the threshold of the house, the night cool and clear. He offered his arm. She took it. This time, there was no mistake, no confusion of destinations. The carriage that waited bore both their names in its future. As they drove away, Clara looked back only once, not at the house or the city, but at the road behind them, narrow and difficult, now complete. She felt no regret for what had been lost. What remained was choice, hard-won and luminous. Beside her, the Duke sat in thoughtful silence, his hand warm over hers. "We will be examined," he said quietly. "We will be judged." "Yes," she replied, "but we will not be mistaken." The carriage moved forward, steady and sure, carrying them beyond rumor and into consequence. London resumed its restless breathing behind them, already seeking the next story. This one, however, was finished. Or rather, it had begun at last, not with accident or scandal, but with two people who had learned that love, when chosen freely, required neither permission nor disguise.